Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello again, everybody. Kim and I are here every week on Franklin Radio, WFPR 102.9 FM, exploring all things wine with you. And today we want to start with an article, once again, Kim, that was in Wine Enthusiast magazine. We love Wine Enthusiast. They have a lot of articles that we cover.
Yeah, there's been some. I like them because their topics are, I feel like, very relatable. I feel like they talk about the things that we get questions about. So it's nice to see, some other professional opinions and comments about a lot of the things that they have to talk about.
Our regular listeners will know that Kim, a lot of times when we talked about wine, will reference wine importers and how to find good wines based on the importer. And this article in Wine Enthusiast was all about what is a wine importer. We've never covered it, so we thought we'd tell everybody all about wine importing business.
That's one of those things that I feel like on a wine bottle, sometimes we'll tell people to turn the bottle around to see if they can get some extra information about the wine. And that's where you'll find the information about who the importer is. And what they do is they are the person or company or organization that actually brings in the wine from whatever country it's from and then brings it into the market here in the US. So they're that, I hesitate to use the word middleman because I feel like that gets a bad rap. What is, I think, nice about a lot of the wine importers, especially for, I know last week's show or the week before's show, where we talked about fine wine and what is fine wine. For fine wine coming into us from other parts of the world, the wine importer really has a significant impact on what are those wines that we are seeing and what is the style, what is the quality, what are we actually going to end up getting at our local restaurants or our retail stores. That really does depend on the importer.
Definitely not the middleman, more the man.
The man.
Without
just that they're
importer,
not the grower producer, right. They're that other step.
They are the ones, though, that approach in our state, the distributor, to say, hey, we have this wine, we'd like to bring it into Massachusetts. And that's how they have to get it in the door to get it to me, to get it to sell to you. So a very important job. And Kim's tip is a real great tip. She always says to turn that label over. If it's an imported wine, see who's bringing it into the country. Chances are the person bringing that in, their palate, if you like that wine, is going to be very similar to something you might also like that they import. So by following them, you can find some other wines that you may like very easily. So always a good tip that you give in the past there, Kim.
And I think it's sometimes a little tricky for people to understand what's an importer versus a distributor versus a supplier. We kind of throw these wine words around a lot, talking about the different levels of the system. What is the chain that a bottle of wine has to go through before it can get into your grocery basket or onto your table. So I think every once in a while, it's nice to spotlight these kinds of things because it gives you, the consumer, a little bit more insight into this is how the ins and outs of the wine world actually work.
Can be complicated because a lot of distributors, even a lot of store owners, can be their own importers. So a lot of stores might not be able to get a certain wine that they like from a distributor, so they reach out to a winery directly and set up their own importing business. And
how common do you think that is?
I only know of like two smaller guys that do it.
And are they retailers?
Yeah. I mean, Medfield Wine, Maddie and Medfield.
Oh,
he's
sure.
An importer. So he has his own importing company.
So you can be an importer and a store.
Yeah. It's just two separate businesses. And he probably sells a good amount of the stuff he's importing, which is fine because he can't get it from anybody else. So, and a lot of times the importer usually focuses on a specific region. And many people might not know, in Franklin, there's actually a new importer in town, a business called Vine Farmer. I know you've met them in the past, right, Kim?
Mm-hmm.
And they import Italian wines as their specialty. They have relationships with small family vineyards in Italy that they visit quite often, or had visited in the past, and they liked them. They couldn't get them. So they started a business based on friendships they developed to bring wines into Massachusetts, being their own importer. So there's small importers, then there's really big importers you probably heard of in the past, like the Kermit Lynch or Wilson Daniels. Now, isn't Kermit Lynch a merchant as well?
Yes. So they started out not only as an importer, but he had, I believe, a retail shop in California.
Retail, yeah. So that's a good example of that. So, I mean, they can be very, very big companies. Another example of an importer would be like Cavit is owned by a very huge importer. Everybody knows Cavit wine, Italian wines. They can be importing huge products, or they can just be importing small artisanal type products as well.
So it's kind of like everything else in the wine world. There are smaller examples and there are larger examples. And, sometimes it takes a little digging to find something that belongs to that level of the chain that impacts the flavor of the wine to the extent that you are then going to go look for it and be like, oh, I really have liked a whole bunch of things that this one particular importer has brought in. Let me go out and see what other things that I can find. And it's often, I think, for some of the better importers of European wines who have been established for a while, like Kermit Lynch, or like Rosenthal, which brings in, or they started as Italian, but I think they have other things too.
Right.
You just turn that label over, and usually it's fairly, a fairly big back label that tells you who the importer is.
Yep, it'll say imported by so and so, and then it'll give the winery information below that. And as a retailer, there's a lot of value in finding or making relationships with who the importers are, because a lot of times the importers work on their own to help promote their products. So they work with the distributor, but they also like to go out on their own to promote their wines. And you can make some real good relationships on the retail side, which in turn helps you as the customer, because the retailer is now focusing on things that other stores might not even know of, because the importer is working directly with the retail to get some specialty products in and giving you good background. And the kind of difficult thing being Massachusetts 3-tier, a lot of times the importers don't work with just one distributor. So they might have, say, 50 wines they import. One distributor might take 10 of them, then they'll bring whatever to another. So they could work with 3-4 distributors within the state. So it kind of complicates the distribution because they're working with so many people. But a lot of times, one retailer, you might like the importer, like Kim says, or then you go to the retail and they only have a certain amount of their wines because they might not deal with all the distributors.
And do you find that sometimes will stretch the resources of that importer a little bit thin if they have to keep up with having multiple distributors in a particular state? Yeah,
I think a good importer has people that will show their products no matter who they're distributed by. They want to tell you what their line is, and they'll tell you right out, this is with so-and-so, this with so-and-so, this one's not even in the state. And surprisingly, a lot of times I find a lot of products that way that I never knew my distributor had, because the importer came in and said, by the way, we also have this or that. And that's how we do a lot of our education or tastings, because the importer directly will come and do the event, because the distributor probably doesn't even know, they're just supporting it.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard when a portfolio is kind of big and there's only, so much time in your day to focus on a particular wine or a particular region or whatnot. As this, nice to have that extra layer of support in the market to be focused on of those sometimes more interesting wines, or things that tend to get lost a little bit because they're not those big branded things that you're trying to push a lot of quantity on, but the quality might be noticeably better. I think of those things when you've got someone who's really paying attention to what they're bringing in, what they're showing, and really has that passion for those wines in their book.
They're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that people in the wine world don't know about. They're the ones who have to get the labels submitted to be brought into the country. They're the ones who have to go to the distributors to educate them on the product or how to sell their products or tell them what the deals are on the product. So they're dealing at every level. They're dealing at the, the government level. They're dealing at the distributor level. They're dealing at the retail level, and they interact with consumers. So it's a pretty broad job that they have to do.
Yeah. And complicated.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not, one person doing all of that stuff, because I can't imagine that you're trying to sell a wine and then also submitting labels for the government to approve of.
Yeah, they do so much. And a lot of times that's who I like to deal with as a retailer, right to who's important. Show me what your portfolio is, because a lot of times the distributor doesn't have the time to show all their products and won't focus as much or give you as much information. And a lot of I don't want to say a lot of values, but a lot of the products I've found have been when an importer approaches me to show me their portfolios.
Well, especially for a shop like yours, because you like to find those interesting, out of the way, you're so much more focused on quality and interesting regions and grape varieties. And it's like, you have a certain perspective that I think dealing one-on-one with an importer helps you with, because you are looking for those interesting things that you can bring to your customers and that you can talk to them about or teach a class about, or be like, hey, we discovered this really cool thing and here, let me share it with you. So it's nice for retailers like yourself to have that group of people that you can go to and have those conversations and really find those wines that I think benefits the entire market by being able to get those wines out there to the consumer.
Yeah, a lot of times the distributors just they have so many products and so many importers they're dealing with. They just don't have the time to show you everything. So you really efficient retailer will look at what's out there, especially if they have needs in certain areas. But it all goes back to your advice, Kim, that you always, give our listeners to check what that importer is. And very rarely does someone come in and say, hey, do you have any other Kermit Lynch wines on your shelf?
Yeah, it is kind of
that importer.
I think it's kind of a deep dive, sort of a way of looking at your wines and choosing your wines. I don't think that it is something that too many casual wine drinkers will do, but if you're really getting into wine and really developing your palate and your tastes and just want to know more and more and more and more, and are open-minded about exploring new wines that you've never had before, I really feel like it is a great way to investigate and experiment with some other wines that are out there that hopefully will align with your tastes, which is, I think, why I started understanding a little bit more about the importers, was because I had reached that point where I was like, okay, I know what I like. And is it a coincidence that they're all, a lot of these wines are brought in by the same company? And I think that is really what hit it off for me many years ago.
And another tip for our listeners is go directly to the importers' websites. And
I have actually found that those websites are really, really useful for finding a lot of detailed information about the wines.
Yeah, and a lot of times they'll have like a search feature to find out what states you can get it in or who's carrying what products, and it'll link you to the distributor. It'll also have the tech sheets. Most of the time, the ones I've seen, you can search by country.
Yeah,
so that's a good resource.
The importer websites were my number one go-to source when I was trying to find new information about wines to educate my legal seafood staff on. Whenever I needed to know something about a wine, the first place I would go would be the website for the importer. And more often than not, they would give exactly the information that I was looking for.
The importers usually post that information first on their website. And many times too, Kim, if someone asks me about a wine I've never heard of, I'll do a search and I'll say, oh yeah, it's listed and this is distributed. I'll give them customer, if I don't work with that distributor, I'll give them the information directly to call and ask them if they can have the importer bring it in or whatever. So a lot of times you call them, they'll listen to you. I don't know if they'll import it for you. But
going the extra mile, Mark Lindsay.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to, I don't have it. Here's how you can get it.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Kim and Mark. You can find more information about Mark on his website, franklinliquors.com, and more information about myself at commonwealthwineschool.com. And you can find our past episodes on SoundCloud and iTunes, and find us on Twitter at Wine Education. Welcome back to The Wonderful World of Wine. Our next article tackles a word that you will often see in wine writing, but can be a little confusing, and that is the word cuvee. Now, Mark, can you explain a little bit to our listeners about what the word cuvee could mean on a wine label?
Cuvee. Interesting enough, another wine enthusiast article we picked up today, and this term can be used many different ways, and you've probably seen it on the front of wine labels, but a lot of times it has to do with a blend or with sparkling wine, cuvee for blend. Mm-hmm. And Kim being the bubbly queen, I'm sure she's very familiar with it. And I researched, I never knew it's cuvee, but is it cuve, Kim, which is a French term, means vat or tank? Is that how the French say it?
I believe so. It's with only one E at the end and not
with
two
only
E's,
one.
Correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So a French term, so obviously related to sparkling world for French.
Because there's so much blending in sparkling wine. I've actually been talking about blends an awful lot with people this last week. I don't know why, but talking about blends and are blends good, and I've been writing a little bit about it. So it seems it's been top of mind for me. So I actually felt that this was a great article to talk about because I've been thinking about it lately. So when we think about the word cuvee, I think at least in terms of wine regions that apply it the most, I think you're right that we do see it attached to sparkling wine houses, champagne houses, a little bit more than other places. Whereas if you're dealing with a still wine, you tend to see the word blend. But for sparkling, they like to stick to the traditional French term and use this word cuvee. And I think what a lot of people don't know about sparkling wine, and especially champagne, is that they're almost always blends. And, sometimes we might think that, why are they making a blend? Does that mean that it's inferior wines that are being put together to try to make something better? No, it's to find the right balance. So it's about putting all of these different components together, just like making a meal. And then what you have as the final product ends up being better than each of the individual elements. And this word is just the one that has come down as the word to describe that blend, especially when we talk about our favorite bubbles.
And there's no legal definition, I think, in any country for cuvee, correct, Kim?
That's true. Yeah, that they did mention that in this article, that it's one of those words that anybody can use it, and there's no specific qualification for using the term. And it's just like, I guess people just sort of understand what is being meant by it when you're a producer.
And they can use it as a combination, either a blend of the wine, a blend of vintage, a blend of vineyards, a blend of grapes. There's multiple ways someone could use the term. And in the article, it mentioned quality, Kim. Do you think it's a misleading term to put on a bottle that people are seeing it and thinking quality? Because if it's a still wine, for instance, and they're relating cuvee to sparkling or champagne, and they see a still wine, it says cuvee of red blend or whatever. Do you think it's a misleading term to guide them to think it's good quality?
I think it could be used that way as sort of marketing usage of a word that maybe people recognize but don't necessarily know what it means. So if English-speaking people, don't necessarily know what that word means, but have seen it on better bottles of wine, I definitely see that it could be a little bit of a tricky use of a word, especially because it's French. And when you put, I think, a French word on, especially an American bottle of wine, it gives it this, this sort of aura of this must be something extra special,
Yeah.
So I think in some cases, it can be used more as a marketing gimmick than anything else.
I almost related to the study they did about putting a picture of a chateau on a label
Sure.
to think it's quality. It kind of goes that way for me with
Yeah.
Cuvée. Do you think it's used as much now as in the past? Because I'm kind of relating to an old-fashioned term, because when French wines were the thing, maybe the American wines wanted to put that on the label to kind of get people into that mentality that it's the same quality as a French wine. So,
yeah, I think you're right.
because I was thinking I haven't seen it on a lot of products lately. And then I searched my database of products that are brought into mass.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like over 600 products with the term Cuvée attached to them.
600?
Yeah, there was like 65 pages of products just searching Cuvée that are brought in. And it was Greek Cuvée, chocolate Cuvée, Spanish, of course, sparkling.
Greek Cuvée? Did it actually say Greek Cuvée?
Greek wine that had Cuvée, Spanish wine that had Cuvée, French, of course, and a lot of sparkling and even Prosecco using Cuvée.
Well, I mean, that's sparkling.
Even Scotch and whiskey using the term Cuvée.
Okay.
Which, I mean, blended Scotch, it makes sense, right?
Absolutely. So I guess it is still a term that is hale and hearty out there. It's not going away anytime soon, I guess.
When do you remember it as far as retail, seeing it first, or consumer, or restaurant? When do you
I think
recall?
I remember seeing it as a consumer, because even before I was in wine, one of our favorite styles of wine to drink always has been California Red Zinfandel. And I remember there was a time where a lot of Zins were using, and I think they still do, use the word Cuvée on their labels. And I remember some of our favorite wines having that, and me not knowing what that meant. Like, what is that all about? So yeah, for me, it definitely, I feel like my first encounter with it was California red wines and red blends.
I was also trying to think about when I've seen it lately on sparkling. Have you seen it lately on a sparkling product?
I feel like I have. I know there are some champagne houses that might have like a special name attached to their basic house style, and they will have the word Cuvée as part of that. I think Taittinger does that.
It's just something I like saying it. I'm surprised that I wonder if it can be
a fun word to say. Cuvée.
I wonder if it could be used as a brand, if someone could brand it as,
Ooh.
Cuvée, the line called Cuvée.
I'm surprised somebody hasn't.
Yeah, I'm sure it's out there. It didn't come up as a producer product name or anything when I searched it.
I'm sure you would have was in there. Sounds like you did a very deep search.
Just putting in that term into products I can buy, and I thought the chocolate one was kind of interesting. Was a chocolate blended wine Cuvée. So
there are a couple of those out there.
I think I remember Castle Rock brand was my first experience with it, seeing it, because they made so many different Pinots or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that's the first time I ever saw it on a label. So another term for our listeners to know if they see it, Cuvée.
So not a word to be scared of, but also not a word to be sort of taken in by either, now that you know simply what it means.
Once again, though, confusing. The wine world just always has to come up with some sort of, can't just be straightforward. This is what it is. It could be, getting back to the fine wine, could be anything. It could,
Our poor consumers, we understand. That's why we're here, trying to help you out with it. Thank you for listening to us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We have been your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lindsay. Our past episodes are on SoundCloud and iTunes. And if you would like to leave a comment or a question for us at the show, you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. And as always, find us on Franklin Radio, WFPR FM 102.9. Cheers.